VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. This is the June 20th edition. We're about five and a half weeks from training camp. And for the first time, I have Thor Nystrom on the show. He writes for Fantasy Pros. How are you, kind sir?
I'm doing good. Good to be here.
Yep, and we're going to talk about four different Vikings items. In addition to Fantasy Pros, where else can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, Fantasy Pros. You can find me at Betting Pros, and I also do a show for Score North
Okay, and then what's the Twitter handle?
at Thor KU.
All right, perfect. All right, sir. So I got what I consider four contemporary Vikings topics to go over for you, and I want your candid opinions. And the first is the Danielle Hunter situation, because I'm thoroughly convinced that will go on until there's resolution, or that will dominate all Vikings talkers. So I'd like to know from you, sir, what is the resolution on the horizon as a prediction from Thor Nystrom on Danielle Hunter?
Yeah, I think the Vikings are motivated to get something done there, right? And it seems like Danielle doesn't have as much leverage there as he would like. I think at the end of the day, something will get worked out there. And so I expect him to be back next season. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But yeah, I would expect Danielle to be back next season.
Do you have that on good intelligence, or is that a personal theory?
That's just a theory at this point. Yeah, that's it. That's just a theory.
And then in the event that you were wrong, let's say he is traded for a second and a blah, blah, blah. Would they pivot to a free agent like Robert Quinn or bring back Unique Ngakoue, or would they just roll with Patrick Jones or DJ Wanham?
So yeah, I've thought a lot about this. I would assume that it would be sort of a combination of the two, where I would guess that they would want to play one of those kids that you're talking about, but that they would sign a veteran as insurance to sort of, not plug and play, but sort of play behind one of them. But I would assume they would lead with the foot of developing one of those kids first. I don't think like that they would, for instance, sign Ngakoue and then play him 80% of the snaps. I think that they would want to, Patrick Jones, develop him firstly, if they were to do that. Because if you're trading Hunter, you're sort of indicating that you have entered more of the rebuild than the competitive rebuild, sort of a thing. So that's what I would assume.
Yeah, where I keep settling on this, trying to make the most sound prediction that I can is you would have the league's 27th ranked defense per DVOA last year, and your solution is to get rid of the two best pass rushers. I can't reconcile how that would be improved, even if Flores is Jesus incarnate. Like I don't know how you could look at it and be like, well, they're in it to win it. On the whole, generally speaking, when you talk about the competitive rebuild, I want to ask you about for now, because we still have a summer to play out, your 2023 win-loss prediction. Are you thinking that this is kind of a flyover season so the Vikings can transform in 2024, or do you still have them very much contending for the North?
Well, and this sort of goes back to the first question, right? Like, is Danielle going to be there or not? Because I think that's going to affect a couple wins one way or the other. But let's just assume Danielle's back. I would say I'm going to go with 10-7 if Danielle is back and the roster looks like how we expect it to look right now. I would say 10-7, and I would say you're competing for the division. Obviously, the division's not very good right now. That's one thing that the Vikings have going for them. I mean, the Lions obviously are the favorite right now in Vegas. I was looking at the odds yesterday. Like I think the Lions are plus 120, 125, like somewhere in there. The Vikings aren't too far behind. And it's funny looking at the Packers odds after they've been favored, all these different years that they're back there. And obviously the Bears odds aren't very good either, but that division is wide open right now. But with the Vikings right now, I would say 10-7. That'd be my prediction right now.
And that's where I'm at. I'm willing to be talked into 11-6 based on how sexy training camp looks and everything. One thing I've mentioned on this show that I look back, and last year was such this precious opportunity to do big things inside the North, because you had the Packers uncharacteristically shitty. We couldn't figure out why in the middle of the season. The Lions started 1-7 or whatever, and the Bears were 3-14. It was this perfect storm to win more than one, or win a playoff game and beyond. But now, as the Lions are the new big thing, and another thing that's really weird is, wasn't the time when Aaron Rodgers finally left the Packers, wasn't that supposed to be cause for celebration for the Vikings? Instead, we're looking up at the Lions. Can you rationalize that?
Yeah, it is kind of weird for sure. Yeah, but like Rogers, the Rogers thing is weird to me because that guy's got such a big fork sticking out of his back. So I think the Wicked Witch is dead there. I also did you see that Jordan Love quote
Yeah.
where he wished that the Bears fans a happy Father's Day? He throws another interception with that quote. I think the Packers are going to be quite bad this year. And in fact, my fear with the Packers are that they're so bad this coming season that they get access to either Caleb Williams or Drake May.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, in the next draft. And further, my fear is that Aaron Rodgers is so bad with the Jets that pick that the Packers are going to get from them conveys like that the Jets turn out to be bad. Because the Packers, they're going to have the 2 first-round picks, assuming that Rodgers plays 65% plus was when that pick conveys. I'm just praying against all hope that the Packers do not get one of those picks is not a top 5 pick. Because obviously Drake May and Caleb Williams are both demigod quarterback prospects in that next class. We do not want the Packers after all these decades of Brett Favre, then Aaron Rodgers, that then they get Caleb Williams or Drake May in the next draft.
Unbelievably, I haven't thought about that. And I'm kicking myself now. Are those what you consider like irrational fears of Thor Nystrom, or do you see those budding on the horizon? That shit could happen.
This is the kind of shit that keeps me up at night. Yeah.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you heard it here first that we would love to see the Packers' demise, but then there is an additional element that, oh my God, they could get one of these demigods, as you called them.
Yeah, right. we want their demise to be like 6-11 demise.
Yeah, we'll take it. Yeah, that's what we want. All right.
Yeah.
Next thing I have is about quarterbacks as well. So for the first time on an NFL calendar, while Kirk Cousins is employed by the Vikings, he doesn't have longer than 1 season. He's flashing it back to the Commanders days where he's on a 1-year prove-it deal. Now, knowing him, he could show up and throw 38 touchdowns, 7 picks, and re-sign. Who knows? I still think he's just going to walk freely to the San Francisco 49ers in March. That's been my theory now since I realized he's not going to be extended. I want you to, kind of like you did with Hunter, I want you to predict what the Vikings do at quarterback in 2024, whether that's re-up with Cousins, which would be his age 36 season, or get a quarterback. What do you think is the next step at quarterback in Adolph-Mensa's competitive rebuild?
I'm with you, Dustin. I think this is the last year. I think that the Vikings have been tipping this off to people with not extending him. I mean, it would have been so easy. And then Cousins let that out there to the media that he wanted to renegotiate or not renegotiate. He wanted to negotiate the extension. And the Vikings were like, no, we're good. Let's just do it. We'll just roll it forward on the 1-year thing. And then we'll see what happens and yada, yada. We had also heard the whispers right when Kwesi got in there that Kwesi wanted to listen to trade offers for Cousins, like, his first off season, whatever. And it sort of seems like the Wolves quashed that. So it's, and Kwesi also was sort of loose-lipped with his opinion of Cousins in the media, where he was saying, like, there's elite quarterbacks out there and we don't really have one of those and yada, yada. So I don't know. I mean, from everything I've heard, Kwesi has sort of been projecting this out there that he might be, sort of eager to move on at the quarterback position. And I think we're going to see that next off season. So I'm totally with you. I mean, my sort of thought here is that it's going to be via the draft, but that's going to sort of come down to how the Vikings finish this season, right? I mean, like if they're picking in the 20s again, that's going to be difficult because you're not going to be able to pick a kid in the 20s and then have him come in and start right away. So then would you do a bridge thing? Could you convince Cousins to come back for a year? Probably not. And to bridge that quarterback, would you sign a quarterback elsewhere to be a bridge for a year? And then, and then you take the kid in the 20s to bridge him over. Obviously it would be more advantageous if the team stunk this year and then you would have access to Caleb Williams or Drake May, but I don't think this team could be that bad because it would, this team's offense, it's going to be good enough where like you're not going to be able to lose that many games, even though the defense is probably going to be awful. But I mean, that's what you're sort of talking about here. But just in theory, I totally agree with you. I think that's what's going to happen. I think this is Kirk Cousins' last year in Minnesota.
Do you neither one of us mentioned Jaron Hall. Do you think he's a total lottery ticket that we won't care about in 5 years, or do you think they have big plans for him?
I think it's more the former.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I think he's more a long-term backup. Like I think you can sort of develop him in terms of that, but I've seen a lot of that kid at BYU. He's been around. He's an older kid, and he's a smart kid, and he can run your system for you and whatnot, but like he doesn't have a great arm. He's an okay athlete. He makes some YOLO decisions. His mechanics are all over the place. He's a former baseball player who a lot of times throws without his base, and he does not have like we see a lot of this with Will Levis, but Will Levis has a right arm from God, and so he can get away with it sometimes, although Will Levis's accuracy gets scattershot because of it. Jaron Hall cannot get away with it. I know that O'Connell and those guys are going to work with him, and like I said, Jaron Hall, he's a smart kid and stuff like that. So you can trust him like a little bit, maybe as a caretaker if you had to get by with him. But I just do. And my colleague at Score, Tyler Fornes, is a big Jaron Hall guy. So he and I disagree a little bit, with regards to this about him. But I could see Jaron Hall sticking around as a backup, but I just do not see it as a starter type guy. So again, like I think more like you're looking at him more as the long-term potential best case scenario backup for the next guy, as opposed to being the potential next guy.
When you were talking about the draft, and presumably that's probably where Kwesi will find his next guy, one thing that I enjoyed about the aftermath of the draft, I can't remember if it was Tom Pelissero or Darren Wolfson. I think it was Pelissero that said that the Vikings had only really considered trading up if Bryce Young fell somehow out of the top, blah, blah, blah. And that gave me cause for optimism that they won't just do it just to do it. They very vividly didn't have a first round grade on Hendon Hooker or Will Levis because they probably would have picked him at 23. So I'm glad that they're being choosy when we get to next year, so that it's not just, well, we got to draft quarterback, so throw it at the dartboard. I'm happy that if indeed that was correct, that their litmus test was Bryce Young or bust. And it was always going to be a long shot that he fell out of the top, blah, blah, blah. But are you, speaking of Bryce Young, who's your guy that's, now that you see a situation, whether he's in Carolina or Stroud in Texan, which guy is going to make the most noise in his first 2 years as a starter?
Bryce Young for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean he was my QB1 with a bullet all season long through the process. Whatever. I'm a huge fan of his. Stroud was my QB2, but he's in a really bad situation there. In terms of the organization, in terms of the supporting cast, I pray that it goes okay for him, but the receivers there are so bad and the infrastructure there is so bad. So I cross my fingers for him. He has a really cool story, CJ Stroud. It's really interesting. CJ Stroud was one of 3 5-star quarterbacks from California in that class, along with Bryce Young. The other one, it's funny, DJ Uiagalelei, who went to Clemson, and now he's resurfaced at Oregon State. He didn't really pan out. But the other 2 kids, they got all the resources in the world, the private quarterback tutoring, everything like that. They were the ballyhooed ones. CJ Stroud, his family didn't have any money. Oh. Like they were living in like above a warehouse. And CJ Stroud, he had to teach himself how to play quarterback with YouTube tutorials. He built himself, like just, like in this warehouse with his single mom, just watching these YouTube tutorials and teaching himself how to throw and everything. And he went from this unknown who wasn't even, like he didn't start in high school until his junior year. And then, just again, teaching himself how to throw. And then all of a sudden he blew up. And then he was getting all these scholarship offers and stuff like that. A really cool story. And then he goes from where he did into here. Then he 5-star and then Ohio State and everything like that. But now he's with the Texans. Yeah. And so I'm really crossing my fingers. I really like the kid. He's to me, he's this sort of new agey pocket passer type guy. He's got some of the mobility. He has the best placement and accuracy in the class. He sort of reminds me of Justin Herbert a little bit, the way he plays. But yeah, really tough situation. And then the other one that I'm really excited to watch is Anthony Richardson, because it's just this sort of unprecedented ball of clay. And I'm just really excited to see how they end up working with him and stuff like that. But we had a really fascinating quarterback class. So it'd be really cool to see how those three guys shake out.
Oh, amen. And on, what was I going to say on Stroud? Yeah, I think Stroud's best hope, and this is probably Captain Obvious shit, is that DeMeco Ryans is the real deal right away. Now, it's not ideal for the quarterback that he's not an offense first coach, but let's assume, it's a big assumption, that DeMeco Ryans knows what he's doing. Well, then if he has the foundation laid on defense and Stroud is just merely decent and then progresses, I think that could be a good fit. But I'm with you. When you pull up their depth chart on ESPN or Our Lads or whatever, you're like, ay caramba, when you see the weapons he has to deal with. All right, the final thing I want to ask you, in the vein of KJ Osborne in 2021, that summer sprung up and was like, well, my goodness, we finally have a WR3. Last year at cornerback, Duke Shelley showed up about middle of the season, and towards the end of the season, when I'd see the ball go in the air towards his side of the field, I'd be like, oh, we're good. We don't have to worry about that. Duke Shelley's over there. Who is a guy or two this year that you foresee as a breakout candidate for these Vikings?
I'm going to say, I'm going to go one on each side of the ball. I'm going to say a Caleb Evans on defense. I'm a fan of a Caleb Evans's game. Obviously, the cornerback room stinks, and so there's all kinds of opportunity there. Andrew Booth, I go so back and forth on him, and for me, the Andrew Booth thing, it goes all the way back to him in college at Clemson, where it was like week on, week off. It went into the spring with, Dustin, I do the NFL draft stuff, and you'd be watching his tape, and sometimes, some days I'd be like, I wanted to rank him in the top, 10 overall prospects in the thing. Sometimes I wanted to rank him as a 4th round prospect. It just depended on the day, whatever. And I think the Vikings internally, they probably feel that way, depending on the day. It's like, is this guy going to be a star? Is this guy going to be on the roster in a couple of years? But with the Caleb Evans, I think it's the opposite. It's like the upside, it might not be there as an all pro, but it's like every day you get the consistency. And I think that's what they're looking for. And, when you you read the reports or when you go out to the mini camps, whatnot, he's like the keep Son Wood guy. Mm-hmm. He shows you the consistent improvement. He brings the consistency to the position. And when you don't have the, right now, the talent or the consistency in that room, I think that's going to win the day.
Okay.
It's also the reason why I think Blackman's going to be starting on the other side, because that kid was dynamite in college football last year, and he's such a great scheme fit. So I think those two guys are going to beat out Booth. So Evans would be my dude on defense. And then I don't know if this guy would count for the conceit of your question on offense, but maybe he does, because I don't see enough people talking about him. And I think people also a little bit misunderstand his game. And a part of it is circumstantial. I'm going to go with Josh Oliver for offense. And part of the reason why I didn't know if it counted or not was because he was like the first signing and he got like okay amount of money. But I see people talking about him and it's like, oh, he's a blocking specialist and he doesn't really catch the ball. What's so funny about that is, again, going back to my NFL draft stuff, coming out of college, it was the exact opposite evaluation. It was, this kid is only a receiver. He can't block. And if he's out of the NFL in a year or two, it's because he abjectly can't block. You'll never be able to teach him to block. And then 3 years, and then he gets cut by the team that drafted him. Was it Jacksonville, right? Or no, I'm sorry. They traded him for a song to the Ravens, right? Like after like a year, he had like an injury or whatever. And then he goes to the Ravens, and then the Ravens figured it out with him. And then all of a sudden he was blocking. Well, the reason he wasn't catching the ball with the Ravens, look at the Ravens. I was going to ask you if I can swear, but look at the Ravens fucking tight end depth chart. Like Mark Andrews, and they picked a billion, Isaiah Likely, and I would have to have it in front of me, but they have like 50 tight ends. Like, it's like, and Josh Oliver was like, what's my quickest path onto the field? Developing the part of my game that like people think sucks. And he became a really good blocker. But the kid at San Jose State was an awesome receiver. Mm-hmm. The fact they didn't utilize him as a receiver, it doesn't mean he can't do it. I already know he can do it. I think that kid is going to be a good receiver for the Vikings. He absolutely is a good receiver. And now he's a good blocker. So, like, I think that signing was a steal. I think it was super duper sneaky. And I think Josh Oliver is going to be way better for the Vikings than people realize. I think that formation, the 12 personnel formation, is going to be dangerous for the Vikings. And then you think about like Osborne sneaking in. You can get Oliver a blow when you want to go 3 wide receiver sets. You can get Osborne in and then get Addison off the field when you want to do it like that. The Vikings now, they can be multiple in a way that they've never been able to before. And you think about a team like the 49ers that have been effectively able to use these multiple personnel, offerings where the defense can't tell where all the players are going to be at any one time on the field when they're coming out of the huddle and stuff like that, and how that discombobulates defenses. You think about Brock Purdy when he came in, like the third quarterback that the 49ers used, and how often the skill players were getting free. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just because the skill players were really good. They were, of course. But it was also because the defense was always confused about where they were all lining up on the field. And I think the Vikings are going to be able to sort of do a version of that this coming season. So I really like that Oliver signing, in part because of that. I also just think he's a better player than people realize. A later breakout because of the circumstances that he was in, but now he's a fully fleshed out player, and a really good signing for the Vikings.
Yeah, you were correct. He was drafted by the Jaguars, and I wholeheartedly agree. I think the Ravens, next to the Bears, ran the ball the second most. So I think by
that complete, too. Yeah,
like out of mere survival, he had to say, well, shit, I got to do something to make a name for myself. And I think that was changed the way that he became more well-rounded, so to speak. All right.
And Thor, he's fucking huge, yep. That
kid. Yeah, he is. Yeah. 6'5". Is it? I think it's about 250.
I think he's 260.
Oh,
like
is it?
He's a big kid. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, sir. Well, we got training camp at the end of July. I'll invite you back on if you had a good time, and we can.
I did. Let's do it.
We can chat about the happenings then. Other than that, we'll talk to you in about 5 weeks. Okay, sir?
Done. Appreciate you, brother.
All right. Take it easy. Later.